Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Sambanis. I'm a certified public accountant. My firm is based in Long Island, New York. And in today's video, we are going to discuss, number one, the Federal Reserve losing the war on inflation. Number two, why inflation is not only going to return, but get much worse. And number three, what to do and how to profit. So thank you in advance for taking the time to watch this. And if you like finance, the economy, economics, these are all things that I've studied for a long time. Doesn't have much to do with taxes per se, but a lot to do with the economy and how to make money. So first off, and the thing that drives me absolutely nuts is initially inflation was transitory, right? Transitory means to transition. And it was going to come in and then it was going to pass. And that never happened. And they said that lie for years upon years. And, nobody holds the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, accountable when they do the interviews, they do the Q&A, when he has interviews outside of the Federal Reserve speeches, nobody holds him accountable. And that's an issue. Then inflation, the government's goal was 2% inflation. Why do they want 2% inflation? And number one, even before, why do they want 2% inflation? What is the government doing in the economy, right? It's supposed to be a free market, not manipulated by the Federal Reserve, not manipulated by the government or anybody else for that matter. So they should keep their hands out of it, but it is what it is. So going with that, then inflation, so their goal was 2%. Here's the deal. Would you rather buy something for $100 or $102? And then the following year, $4.50, right? If you have inflation every year of 2% that goes up on average, that means prices are increasing. So do you prefer to pay more or do you prefer to pay less? Of course you prefer to pay less, right? Big screen TVs used to be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, I suppose, especially when it was those huge monstrous ones with the huge backs. And what happened? Technology came in, they made them super thin, they made them super affordable, and now you can buy an 85-inch TV for $850 at Costco, right? You can't knock it. So that's the free market working. So if we were supposed to average 2% in the last 3 years due to COVID, which we'll go more into this, and bear with me, by the way. I just read off my bullet points. I speak freely. I don't have a script. I just speak freely. And I feel that if you have to read off of a script, then either A, you should, be more confident and comfortable in what you're reading, and you should be able to speak about it freely. And if you stutter or stammer, too bad. So hopefully I didn't lose anybody thus far, and I appreciate you staying, and I promise you it'll be worth your time. So due to COVID hitting, Donald Trump printed more money in the 4-year term than any other president in history. I suspect the current president, Joe Biden, will surpass that. But basically, there's a massive amount of inflation, which is printing of money, right? And up until now, yes, we had quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2, 3, 4. We had all sorts of bailouts. But those went directly to the financial institutions, right? So it didn't go to the consumers. But now all of a sudden you turn around and you give everybody $600 stimulus checks, $1,200 stimulus checks, $1,400 stimulus checks. And then case in point, I have a client who makes about $500,000 a year. His son during COVID was working at Dunkin' Donuts. He got laid off. And what was he able to do in the state of New York? He was able to go and apply for unemployment because all of a sudden everybody qualified for it. And he was making about $150 to $200 a week. And due to COVID and the federal government, offering, I lost my train of thought. Offering unemployment benefits, he was making about $500-$600 a week. So, people who were doing absolutely nothing, who never made that amount of money before, were making that amount of money. And what did people do with it? When you have free money, you don't care about it, right? It's just super easy to spend it versus when you go out and work for it. And, another analogy, which I love, which Peter Schiff uses, they sent out, small checks to, people. And so all the prices of these smaller things, household goods, went way up through the roof. On the flip side, if the government had shipped or sent out $1 million checks to everybody, what would have happened? The prices of Ferraris would have gone through the roof. The prices of Maseratis would have gone through the roof. Porsches, everything else, houses. Actually, houses did explode in prices, but that's another story for another day. So basically, again, that's what happens when you give out money to everybody and for free and nobody works for it. So the idea of averaging 2% inflation in the last 3 years, I'd say we've probably averaged about 33% per year. I can't tell you how many items that I've seen that have doubled and tripled in price. So if something's tripled in price, that's a 300% increase. Divide that by 3, that's 100% per year increase, right? If it doubled over the last 3 years, then that's 33% increases. So I'm being very fair when I say 20%. So all the years before that, we were able to, quote, maintain 2% inflation, and then it blew up through the roof. But again, it was supposed to average 2% inflation. And what happened? We didn't average anywhere near that, right? Even with the government's honest numbers, we didn't average anywhere near that. So what should happen? Inflation should be deflation, right? We shouldn't be averaging 2% now. We shouldn't be aiming for 2%, which we're not averaging 2%. It's closer to 4% going off the government's rigged numbers. But we should have a negative. That big screen TV should be going down to $500-$600. That insulation that I used to buy at Home Depot for $30 a vat or $30 a bag before COVID is now $80. That should go back down. That should drop in price substantially, but it's not going to. Unfortunately, until the economy crashes and the American consumer is tapped out, which is why recently Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, Target, and a litany of other companies have come out and say the American consumer is struggling. They're tapped out. They're maxed out on their credit cards. They're having 3-4 jobs to make ends meet. Food is through the roof. And of course, government, when they do their inflation numbers, they strip out, quote, food and gas prices. I mean, how do you avoid food? How do you avoid gas? So it's absolutely psychotic. And, number one, the government shouldn't be involved with inflation or anything else for that matter when it comes to the economy and economics and finance. And number two, if they're going to, then they should be held accountable, which they're not going to. So, and another example, I went to Chipotle last night. My mom asked me to get her a flipping bowl. It was $14, and then I had to pay another $1.50 in tax for sales tax to New York State. So $15 for a burrito bowl, right? We're talking rice, black beans, salsa, cheese, guacamole, steak, and chicken. I was going to look up their SEC filing to see what their margins are, but I didn't want to get that much more miffed about it, to put it nicely. But again, a bag of rice is $2-3 if I'm paying for it. A can of beans is 50 cents to $1 if I'm paying for it. Salsa, I could buy a big case at Costco for $10. And, 5 avocados are, or 3 of them are $5. So, that bowl probably cost Chipotle $2, $3, $4 at the absolute most. And they have, a 200-300% markup, which that is their job. They should be making money. They should be making their shareholders money. But enough is enough. I personally stopped going to Chipotle a while ago when these prices became that egregious. I'm just that sick of it. And frankly, I'd rather go down the block to Cava, where I know I'm going to probably pay about the same price, but at least I get 2 or 3 meals out of it, number one. And I feel like the ingredients are much better there, which is actually why I'm probably going to be buying stock in Cava. In addition to the quality and the food, and I happen to like it there, also their financials are great. Obviously, don't go buying a stock if just based on the fact that you like the product, right? If you like Sears, if you like JCPenney and you bought the stock, you'd be out a lot of money. So, and again, I was watching a CNBC interview yesterday, and the guy was saying, within the next 12 to 18 months, inflation should go back down to 2%. But again, what about the 100 to 200-300% inflation that we just experienced? Nowhere near 2%, even with the government's false fake numbers. So, what does that mean? The cure for high prices are higher prices, right? When I go out, I have my own CPA firm. I have other businesses that I own. I have to raise my prices, and that's the cure for everything. And unfortunately, that's what everybody's done. McDonald's Happy Meal is now $18. To eat at Chipotle, had I got a drink yesterday, would have been $18. To feed a family of 4, Chipotle is $80 with tax. That's psychotic. Same thing with McDonald's, and they're supposed to be, quote, cheap. So inflation has basically ravaged the economy. It's going to continue to ravage the economy. And when I say the economy, I mean the lower and middle class. And rich people can afford this. And, we need massive deflation. And to cut right to it, everybody is now betting that the Federal Reserve is going to cut rates going forward, right? So we had interest rates of 2-3%, and and they printed a ton of money, and they attributed the lower rates to inflation. So what did they do? What was the cure to get inflation, quote, under control? So now instead of doing 20% a year, we're now only at 4%. Which is still, again, shouldn't be that high. If anything, prices should be going down in an actual working economy without the government being involved. But basically, they're betting that it's going to go down. So, but if the cure to higher prices was to raise interest rates, which they didn't raise them anywhere near high enough, let's use a drunk scale, right? Super sober, you're at a number 10. Super drunk, you're at a 0. We were at 2%, so we were super close to being super drunk for super long, 15, 16, 18 years. And then they say, all right, let's sober up a little bit and go up to 7-8% interest rates, or whatever it's at now, 5-6%. And, obviously the banks have to make money on top of that, so now they're 7 or 8%. But going off the Federal Reserve, 5-6%, 5.5% to be exact. Sorry to hone in on that. So if the cure was to raise rates, and now you're saying it's under control, why would you go back down the scale of drunkenness to get drunker, which is now going to reignite the prices? Right? That makes zero sense. So if the cure was to raise rates, then why would you, feed into the disease and decrease rates? And the government's going to have to do this, by the way, because the federal deficit is now $33 trillion. That doesn't account for unfunded liabilities. And we're going to be paying over $1 trillion on the U.S. national debt very soon. So how do you cut the deficit? Well, you lower interest rates, and therefore you lower your interest payments. Technically, we should be cutting a ton of government jobs. We should be cutting a ton of government benefits. The list goes on and on of what the government does wrong, but we're not even going to get into that. That's a whole other video for another day, a very long video. And the other caveat is once they lower the rates, A, that's going to generate inflation, but B, everybody's going to lose faith in the U.S. government, and they're going to see we have massive inflation. We're becoming a banana republic if we aren't already, and the dollar is going to crash. And then once the dollar crashes, what happens? We have to buy our oil abroad, right? We have to buy our gasoline abroad. So now the dollar compared to other currencies is way too far down. And now we have to buy these foreign currencies, even though I guess oil is traded in dollars, but we're moving away from that. And basically the cost of everything is going to go up. Everything is, not everything, but mostly everything is predicated on the cost of gas and oil. So our currency conversion is going to go up. The cost to buy stuff from China is going to go up. The cost to import everything is going to go up. And it's going to just be that much more massive inflation. So we're in a vicious cycle. The government the Federal Reserve didn't, and it does not have the nerve to do the right thing and put interest rates at 10 to 12% and let everything crash and burn, and we have a massive deflation. And it sounds horrible. Yes, it's going to suck, but that's the only way to rebuild what we need to rebuild. So as a side note, and I'll kind of probably cut into this a little more, but basically gold has got to skyrocket. 40% of the money in circulation was printed in the last 2-3 years. It's a huge problem. Gold's barely moved up. I personally bought some last week. I bought some silver last week. I've also been buying junior mining stocks, both gold and silver. I've been buying foreign stocks as well. But long story short is deflation is good and inflation is bad. And more inflation is coming. And in 2020, you had to earn about $70,000 to $75,000 in order to buy a house before COVID. And now you need to earn about 50% higher, or about $115,000. The average U.S. earner makes about $40,000 a year, Hopefully, in theory, at least, if you're a married couple, one person is above average if the other one's making the average, or hopefully one's way above average if the other one is way below average, or, before the government got involved and took everybody off the gold standard, it used to be that the wife would be able to stay home, take care of the kids, raise the house, and the husband was able to work and support everybody on a full-time job. And that is obviously no longer the case. What other issues are going on right now? Lenders have issued a record number of foreclosure notices regarding risky property loans, in particular mezzanine loans for commercial properties. Case in point, WeWork. The CPI rate came out last month. Everybody assumes now that the war on inflation is over. Everyone thinks the Fed won. We didn't, right? There was a 0.01% decrease, and the stock market beyond rallied. It beyond rallied, but the caveat is the core inflation, stripping out, again, food and gas, which is completely insane, since January has been 0.33 per month. That's 4% annually. And so using the government's rigged numbers, we're still way above 2% inflation, and we haven't retracted anything to account for the massive inflation for the last 3 years that we need now, deflation, and prices need to come down substantially. Chipotle needs to lower their prices. A cup of coffee should not be $3.25. Anywhere you go now, $3.25. If you go to Starbucks and you want one of their special lattes or whatever they're called, $5.50. What planet are we on? So using the actual numbers, if we use the 1970 calculation, I would say inflation is closer to 6 to 7%, but I still feel those numbers are way rigged. Paychecks inflation adjusted. Basically, that shows paychecks are decreasing compared to inflation. Food prices rose month over month. Shelter prices increased month over month by 6.7%. So just round it up 7%. That's almost 80% if you annualize it. We're talking shelter, housing, rent, utilities, all that stuff doubling year over year. Did your income double year over year? Unless you're in the top 5, 10, 15%, probably not. Services increased 5.5%. They consider that a leading indicator. I provide services. I have some .coms. I have a CPA firm. We have a payroll company. And yes, thankfully we're so swamped that we get to pick and choose what work we want to do. And we just keep raising rates because it's the law of supply and demand. Whoever wants to pay the most for my time is going to get it. And that's the way it is, And listen, if we have somebody with a hardship case, do we do it? Would we do it? Or have we done it on pro bono? Absolutely. Or do we lower it to a very reasonable amount? Absolutely. But on the flip side, prices have to go up. My cost for everything has gone up. I just had to give my employee a 10% raise, in addition to a bunch of other raises she got throughout the year and a very substantial bonus. And why? Because the price of everything for her, housing, shelter, car, auto has gone up through the roof. You used to be able to buy a nice new car for $40,000, $50,000. Now to buy a nice new car, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, if you're looking at the higher end automobiles. So prices have moderated, but they're still increasing. We need deflation. The markets read this, that the Fed rates are over. And you know what? Maybe they are. Jerome Powell, if he were here, I would say it. He has no backbone, he has no spine, and he has no idea what he's doing. He should have been fired a long time ago, but the only reason he probably got appointed is because he either has no idea what he's doing or is just completely a political hack. And basically when inflation is under control, then they're going to start creating inflation, which is insane. You're back to a vicious cycle. It's just like an alcoholic who had DTs, had withdrawals, and now he's like, all right, I'm all better. Let me go back to the alcohol. You're going to be in a vicious cycle all over again. And as an everyday American, do you want inflation? No, right? Does your 401k benefit? Yes. Does your house price benefit? Yes. Do you get to really do anything with it? No. So Wall Street wants it. You don't want it. You don't want your prices increasing. And I guess it was great when it was only, the inflation only went into financial assets, but now that it's gone into everyday prices, nobody wants it. It's a big issue. So what's the reality? And listen, I wish I had a brighter note here. By the way, if you've listened this far, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That means you've obviously liked it this much, and I appreciate it, and I apologize that it took me a little while to get warmed up in the beginning. But we're toast, right? We're going to become a banana republic. We can only do so much about it. And, I also wanted to point out that in the comments, there was two people who had questions. One said, why did it take so long for inflation to pop up under, why didn't it pop up under Trump, but why did it pop up under Biden? Well, they started sending out everybody money in April and May of 2020. So it took a while to go work its way through the money system. They paused student loan debts, right? They paused mortgage payments. So it took a while to take effect, but everybody had all this free money. Everybody had a lot less expenses cut, to pay, and therefore it took a while to get into the system. But here we are now, and Joe Biden is going to get blamed. But this goes back to Alan Greenspan, right? Interest rates being 3%. It was great for the financial markets. It was great when everybody's 401k was increasing. It was great when the housing prices were increasing and interest rates were super low. It's no longer great. It's painful, There's no two ways about it. And, just to go back a little further, had they sent out, what I said originally, had they sent out $1 million to everybody, then the prices of all the high-end products would have just gone up that much higher because that would have been that much more attainable or unattainable. And the other question I had was on the Fed's policy projections. They don't have any. They say they're data-driven. And I don't even think they're data-driven. I think they just look at Wall Street once, and they basically do that. Yeah, they've raised rates, but they're going to go back down. What does Wall Street want? They want it to go down. Does the Federal Reserve have to appease the government first? Yes, I guess so, in order to keep their jobs, right? They're appointed, but technically they could be fired. Donald Trump wanted to fire Jerome Powell. Joe Biden, I don't think he knows what planet he's on, so he wouldn't even know what it means to fire somebody, with all due respect. And the solution is, as a person, do the next right thing, right? That's just on a moral level. That's just my message. That's just what comes to mind. That's what I feel like sharing. Do the next right thing. And also, don't be dependent on anybody, right? Save your cash. Maybe consider buying some foreign currencies. Buy gold. Buy silver. Buy foreign stocks. Buy some junior mining stocks. Buy some companies that are going to benefit from inflation. Buy stock in companies that are going to have pricing power. Utility companies, right? No matter what, you're going to need utilities. No matter what, I hate to say it, if you drink, you're going to want alcohol. If you smoke, you're going to need nicotine. So sin stocks are great. Energy companies are great. Products that we need, gold, silver, the list goes on and on. And, any of these companies, these high-tech companies, yes, they're probably way overvalued, but at the end of the day, and they're service-based, so they could probably take a haircut. It could go up, it could go down based on how much inflation they come back with, but you could also consider short in stocks. I mean, that would be another conversation, another video for another day. I'm not a financial advisor. Don't take any reliance on what I have to say. I'm just telling you what I'm personally doing. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you found it informative. And again, please like, subscribe, and comment.